The winter of 1897 was the cruelest anyone in the Dakota Territory could remember. Snow fell day after day, blanketing the prairie in a cold, endless silence. The ground froze solid, and even the toughest men found their shovels useless against the iron-hard earth. Among them was Thomas Whitman, a quiet farmer who had spent his entire life working the same stubborn land his father once tamed. But now, with his wife Martha gone and debts piling high, Thomas was a man running out of hope. Then one gray February morning, Doc Henderson approached him with an offer, one that would change his life forever. "Thomas," the old doctor said, fiddling with his spectacles, "I've got a job that ain't easy to ask of anyone, but you're a man I can trust." Thomas listened, wary but curious. The doctor explained that a young woman had been found on the road south of town, lifeless, frozen, without a name or family. The travelers who found her couldn't stay and left a few coins for her burial. But the gravedigger was laid up sick, and the ground was too hard for most to manage. Thomas, strong and used to hard work, agreed to dig the grave. He needed the money, and, truth be told, the distraction from his loneliness. Still, something about the whole situation left him uneasy. When Doc Henderson lifted the sheet covering the woman, Thomas froze. She looked, peaceful, too peaceful. Her skin was pale, but not the lifeless kind of pale he'd seen before. Her golden hair spilled across the pillow like sunlight trapped in frost. "She doesn't look gone," Thomas murmured. The doctor sighed. "I know, that's what troubles me." That afternoon, Thomas worked through the bitter cold, building a fire to thaw the frozen earth bit by bit. By dusk, he'd managed to dig only a shallow grave. The snow fell soft and steady as he and the doctor carried the coffin to the cemetery. When the doctor left, Thomas stayed behind to finish the job, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the flicker of his lantern's light across the coffin. Maybe it was that strange tug in his chest that said wait. He hesitated, and opened the lid one last time. What he saw made his breath catch a faint flutter beneath her eyelids. And then, slowly, impossibly, her eyes opened. Blue, bright, alive. Where am I?" she whispered. Thomas stumbled back, stunned. "You're in Millbrook," he said softly. Well, I was about to bury you." Despite the shock, she smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I owe you my life." Her name was Elizabeth Carson. She remembered being thrown from her horse during a snowstorm, the cold swallowing her whole before she blacked out. Had Thomas not checked that coffin one last time, she never would have woken. Thomas offered her shelter at his farmhouse until she regained her strength. And so began a season neither of them would ever forget. Elizabeth brought warmth back into the home that had felt empty since Martha's passing. She cooked, laughed, read books by the fire, her presence turning the quiet house into something alive again. In return, Thomas taught her about the land, about resilience, about starting again. As the winter thawed into spring, something tender bloomed between them. What began as gratitude grew into a deep, steady love, the kind that feels like it was meant to be all along. One morning in April, as sunlight danced on the garden soil, Thomas turned to her and said, "Elizabeth, would you stay? Not as my guest, but as my wife." Her laughter was like the first song of spring. "Thomas Whitman," she said with a smile, "I thought you'd never ask." They married that June beneath the same oak tree that once shaded her nearly dug grave, now covered in wildflowers. They'd planted together. Years later, when people asked Thomas how he met his wife, he'd chuckle and say, "I was hired to bury her, but she had other plans." Elizabeth would smile and add, "Sometimes life has to stop completely before it can begin again." And so, their farmhouse became known across Dakota as a place of kindness, a home that never turned away a traveler in need. Together they raised children, tended the land, and lived each day grateful for the miracle that had begun with a frozen grave and a single act of compassion. Because, as we like to say here on Whispers of Kindness, sometimes, even in the coldest winters, love finds its way back to life.